Bullshit.
It's the No BS Marketing Show. I'm Dave Mastovich. Our guest today is Matt Helfrich, President, Waldron Wealth. But first, let's cut the bullshit. Data is king. In God we trust, all others bring data. You can have data without information, but you can't have information without data. Good quotes. As leaders, communicators, and marketers, we have access to so much data, yet a lot of it goes unused while other data is neglected or abused. I tell clients and prospects that their internal data is gold. Once we dig into it with our Pareto Principle Plus, Mass Solutions took the 80-20 principle that 80% of your business comes from 20% of your customers, and we added to it as part of our intellectual property and built it into a process to help clients better understand their customer opportunity. Why? Many reasons, but first, listen to these stats from one of my all-time favorite books, Made to Stick, by Chip and Dan Heath. 63% of listeners remember stories, 5% remember individual statistics. Let me say that again. 63% of listeners remember stories, 5% remember individual statistics. It's how you use the data, the statistics. It's how you turn that data or statistic into something meaningful for each of your target audiences. It's about turning statistics into stories that resonate, into messaging that moves. Stop using data as a crutch. Start leveraging your internal gold, your internal information. Turn it into stories that matter to your target audiences. It's about understanding your customer opportunity and then leveraging it through no BS marketing and messaging. Our guest today is Matt Helfrich, President of Waldron Private Wealth. Matt's been instrumental in creating and refining Waldron's investment discipline. More recently, he's focused on expanding service offerings across multiple generations of clients and leveraging technology to enhance client experience. Matt's appeared in the Wall Street Journal, Barron's, Private Wealth Magazine, Wall Street Week, Forbes, and Smart Money, among others. Matt, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Dave. Glad to be here.
We're excited to have you here, and we started off talking basketball for 10 minutes, and you humored me and let me talk as if I were still a coach. I coached my last game, I think, this past week. But we're into March Madness. Do you have anything you want to give? The show will air just as we're about to start March Madness. So any thoughts about it this year?
You know, with me, when I do a bracket, I always find that overthinking tends to lead to poor performance. So I always, I've won probably in the 15 years, 20 years I've done brackets. I think I've won 3 or 4 of them. And it's always been the one that I've done scrambling at the last minute. It's 11:50 on Thursday and the games are getting ready to start, and I'm the one running in at the last minute scribbling stuff down, and I always also find what has worked out for me in the past, every time I've won, I've picked a Big Ten team in the Final Four that no one else has picked. So Michigan State has been a gem for me a couple times in the Final Four. So it always works out to be that Big Ten team that no one expected hitting the Final Four that's had me capture the prize at the end.
It sounds like you have a pretty good success rate. I often wonder, what is the norm to win once every 10 years, once every 15 years, once every 20? And is it based on how many one does? Like, I don't do 5 of them, but I have friends that do 5 or 6. My sons do 3 or 4. I might do 1 or 2, and I do what you do. I just whip through it. But I have won, I think, 3 times, but I've been doing it a ridiculous amount of years. So I wonder if there's anyone out there that, I shouldn't say anyone, I wonder how many people out there have never won.
Oh, I'm sure quite a bit. The other thing too, again, not to overthink it, but the key that I've found is you need to have 3 of the 4 teams in the Final Four. You don't need not get the winner. You just need to make sure no one else gets the winner. But you need to have at least 3 of the 4 teams in the Final Four, and you need to have one of those 3 teams that you pick has to be a team that no one else thinks it's going to be in there. And I feel, ACC gets a ton of love. Even the SEC and the old Big East gets used to get a ton of love, but no, everyone tends to overlook historically the Big Ten is at least getting to that Final Four level. So I always found having a Big Ten team amongst 3 of the 4 teams has usually been my key to success.
I'm going to assume you have some ties to a Big Ten school.
No, I don't. I don't have any Big Ten ties at all. It's just that's what's worked with me. Or, you know, whether it be Wisconsin, whether it be Michigan State, or whether it be even Michigan, sometimes surprising people and getting in there. It's been those teams that have sort of snuck in the past, and you can probably look back and say, oh yeah, I remember when Michigan State got in there. I remember when Wisconsin got in there. Oh yeah, I remember that time Michigan snuck in there. And that's usually what's worked. It's been one of those 4 seed teams that no one expected to make it to the Final Four. Everyone has a 1-2. 1s and 2s, sometimes they'll have a 3, but a lot of people don't put those 4s in there. I'd like to say I picked Virginia Commonwealth, but no, that wasn't me.
Well, you take an analytical approach to your March Madness, and you've taken an analytical approach to your career. Today's rant was about data and turning data into gold. And so let's take a back in time look at things. Talk about your career path, your journey, and how you've applied this analytical and fiscal discipline to achieve the heights that you have.
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, when we've talked about it, you know, I've been in the business for, you know, almost going on 17 years. And along the way, it's been incremental changes to sort of better myself, better my career along the way. So when I started, 17 years ago, I worked for a firm that was actually not too far from here, Innovative Benefits Consulting, and they did, higher end insurance work for executives and families. And it was interesting because it had that small business feel to it. So I got to experience the 8 to 10 person type of environment and decision making and the entrepreneurial nature of an 8 to 10 person firm. And then I spent, a couple summers as an internship. I spent a couple summers doing that. Still kept in really good touch with the founder and CEO of the business, who was a good family friend. And from there, I went to what is now Wells Fargo Advisors. Unfortunately, Wells Fargo kind of has a little bit of a tainted name recently, given what's been going on. But so I started out there again, working for a gentleman in a team there, much bigger feel. As a part of a larger corporation, very white shirt, red tie, blue suit type of culture, very male dominated culture. That just wasn't for me. And it's funny because there's the data, there's the analytical approach, but I firmly believe at its core, human beings are about relationships and building relationships, and we seek relationships, and we. So it's funny because I think I told you this story once. I was at a gas station about 16 years ago, and I ran into the founder of Innovative Benefits Consulting at the gas station, and I was pumping gas. He said, "What's going on?" I said, "Oh, it's great. I'm at." Well, at the time it was Prudential Financial. I mean, you're at Prudential Financial and, things are going all right, but, it's just, it's a big company, it's a different culture. It's, it's white shirt, blue tie. You can see I'm not wearing a tie here right now. I'm going to the office right from here. I said, it's just not a good fit. And he's like, you know what? There's a guy named John Waldron, who is really building a pretty cool financial services group. At the time, we were in the North Side. You ought to give him a call and check it out. So, I called John Waldron. I had to call him several times because sometimes CEOs of businesses don't always return your first call. So, called him. Every couple days to make sure I, got in there and got on his meeting calendar, met him, did an interview, and that was 2002, 15 years later, or 16 years later, here I am today as president, now partner. I'm a partner of the business. I bought a portion of the equity off of John just this past year. So it's, relationships, never burning bridges, understanding the culture that you want to be a part of, understanding how you can incrementally better yourself along the way, and understanding what you want along the way, and not necessarily going for what's the highest paying job up front, but going for the job that matches your culture and matches, what you're trying to get to get out of life.
I think that's great for a couple of our target audiences that listen to the show. One is people earlier in their career who love the no BS concept and are trying to figure out what they're going to do next. And then also we have a lot of people in the middle part of their career who have achieved but are now maybe looking, not sure what to do next. So you brought up a couple key points. You don't burn any bridges and you build strong relationships. So serendipity. You're at a gas station. You weren't looking for a job, but you weren't completely happy. And then you hit the key next point was you said it was about culture. And you had a person who you had a strong relationship with who knew you well enough to say, hey, someone that I think you'd fit with, you should talk to. And then you had the persistence to keep calling when he didn't take your first call or two, because here you are at a job that you weren't miserable at and you're making good money and it's an impressive job and you're calling someone who hasn't returned your call and you stuck with it. So those are all the kinds of things that I think listeners can benefit from in the building the relationships, sticking with relationships. Relationships are indispensable, not disposable. And far too many people leave a job and think that relationship, or subconsciously think that relationship was disposable. I'm gone. It's too hard to keep in touch. You stayed in touch, and then serendipity kicks in. You're at a gas station. Now, how cool is that?
Exactly. And it's funny because the gentleman who I left, the group that I left to join Waldron, I still keep in touch with him as well. So it's funny how those things work. And, I had someone tell me, the advice I've gotten has not been complicated. It's been simple advice, but it's really hard to execute. That's following up and staying persistent. And here's what's crazy: doing what you say you're going to do. So often in life, we say things, and times get busy. We get into other things, and we don't necessarily say what we're going or do what we say we're going to do. If you just follow up and stay persistent and do what you say you're going to do, I have found that to be the most effective advice I got in my life. And it's the whole Warren Buffett adage: it's simple, but it's not easy to do. That's simple advice, but it's very hard to do. I mean, just think about in life how many times you just wish someone would have returned your call or followed up with you, and you've gone on other things and you forgot about it, and that person sort of loses the opportunity with you, whether it be a contractor in your life or a potential employee or a potential customer. So that to me has been the most valuable advice I've received.
You go in 2002. A young guy, you've got a solid career to that point, but you're still very early in your career. You come to Waldron, and now here 16 years later, you've really helped grow the company. You've grown professionally yourself. Talk about that stint, and because when you walked in the door, what were you doing? And then was there any big peaks and valleys with 2008 was probably a memorable year in some good and bad ways.
Yeah. So the beauty that you sometimes find in working in those entrepreneurial environments is you get to experience and try everything. And that to me was the biggest key to my success. Is I always wanted to take on more. I always wanted to do more. We have a very strong culture. Dave, you've been to our office. It's a very entrepreneurially driven. It's a very service driven culture. Our employees are really, and team members are really important to us. Our clients are incredibly important to us. So what I wanted to do is to do anything I could to make sure we either bettered the mission of Waldron or better the experience our clients had. So 2008, 2009, I'm not going to lie, it was incredibly difficult. However, the couple things that I learned in 2008, 2009 came from some of our clients that you have those difficult conversations with, because the market's going down. People think the world, financially speaking, may be coming to an end. There's talk of, is this going to be the Great Depression all over again? And some of the best advice I got from John Waldron, I even got from our clients, is speaking in plain English, not using jargon, being empathetic. I think that's another challenge everyone has, is you feel that the subject, you're the expert, so you can talk in jargon. But at the end of the day, sometimes it's looking at someone in the eye and saying, look, I understand what you're going through right now. This is very challenging. I understand you're scared. We're going to get through that. That means a whole lot more to people, rather than just speaking in jargon and quoting statistics. Going back to your intro, in those types of situations, statistics don't matter. Stories matter. Telling stories about how we've experienced these types of environments, economically speaking, in the past, talking about what it means to them and what we're going to do to incrementally improve or to make changes so that they can think more positively about the future. And so, as you hear me talking right now, I'm not overcomplicating it. I think oftentimes when you're young in your career, you feel that by quoting jargon, and by speaking in statistics, and by overcomplicating the words that you speak, people are going to take you more seriously. I think that's probably the biggest challenge I've always had to try to overcome is you're sitting across the table with people that have had much more life experience than you. You have more technical experience than them, but they have more life experience than you, and you're trying to tell them that it's going. These people that have been very successful, you're trying to tell them it's going to be okay. And sometimes the best way of doing that is just relating to them and being empathetic to them. And I think whether it be in that type of environment, whether it be with your team members that you're trying to get more out of, whether it be just at home, showing a little bit of empathy tends to go a long way in life. And I think speaking slowly, telling stories has been some of the best advice that I've received. And it's that sort of homegrown versus inexperienced versus stuff that you get out of books. They don't teach you in college to have a higher EQ, emotional quotient, versus IQ. So much of it is getting and beating into you textbook knowledge and case studies. It's not the sitting down, listening, understanding, hearing the emotions and seeing the emotions that's on the other side of the table.
Great stories, great feedback from Matt Helfrich of Waldron here on the No BS Marketing Show. Matt, a number of points I wanted to drill down a little bit more on. The first is related to, I believe, self-esteem. And you were talking about how early in your career, early in anyone's career, they tend to use statistics and jargon more than as you get a little bit more seasoned, you're able to realize that you have more self-confidence. So you just kind of say what you think is happening. Tell me, as a leader, how you help people at your company who are at that early stage and maybe they are more apt to use jargon, or they aren't as comfortable yet, don't have the self-confidence or self-esteem yet to really be themselves and to tell stories.
Yeah. And so that's a great point, because one of the things I try to do is, stories matter, right? Stories matter when you're trying to work with existing clients. Stories matter when you're trying to talk to newer clients or try to prospective clients. One of the things that we do as part of our organization is we have, I do lunches with people. I do town halls with people. We do smaller group meetings with our younger staff. And what we try to do is tell them those stories and why those stories, and lay out sort of personal case study examples of why these types of things matter. And you have to build it into your culture. If you have a culture of, just rote statistics and everyone's sort of in it for themselves and operating in silos, and, with their own, to use another phrase, their own sort of book of business, you're never going to have that knowledge shared across, and it's never going to make the collective group better. So one of the interesting things about our organization is we don't have sort of a quote unquote book of business model where everyone sort of is running and controlling their own fiefdoms. We've deliberately made it a team-oriented culture and a firm-oriented culture. And what I think that allows is more knowledge share across the greater organization to tell those stories. And to, part of being a leader sometimes is humbling yourself and sort of admitting that, hey, let me tell you about the mistakes I've made and the challenges I've had, and so that you can understand how you can improve and learn from them as well. I have not had a perfect career, right? I don't know a single person that has had a perfect career, but sometimes, your best way of advancing in life is learning and understanding from your mistakes. So I guess that would probably says I made a lot of mistakes, because I feel pretty good about my career right now, but I've learned a lot over the years. The biggest thing that probably anyone's ever told me is just listening. I mean, I think I'm a type A personality. I'm a very, driven type A personality, which I guess is one and the same. And I'm very direct. And so sometimes people have just said some of the best advice. It's like, hey, you're talented, but you just got to shut up and listen. It's the whole, 2 ears, one mouth. We've heard it in so many different ways, so you should be listening twice as much as you are talking. And that's probably the best piece of advice I got, is just sit back, listen, hear what either the employee, the client, the potential client, the vendor is saying, and think. Don't have your response ready. Listen to them, then craft your response. That's the other piece. You go in there. I would go in there with my agenda and I would have my talking points, but I don't know what they're saying, what the other person's going to say. So how can I have my talking points ready if I don't know what the questions coming at me are going to be? So that is probably my other biggest piece is listening, empathy, doing what you say you're going to do, follow up. That's critical as well. I love sending notes after I have meetings with clients, vendor, potential clients, sending notes, sort of summarizing what we're going to do, what the action steps are going to do. I think those are critical because it shows A, you're listening, B, you're going to follow up, and C, you're doing what you say you're going to do.
A couple of things. You talked about listening. I love your point because one of the things that I learned a long time ago and try to coach people on is far too many people are already preparing their response while the person's talking. And you brought up the point that you got to listen the whole way through, pause, and then craft your response. Because if you're trying to think of your response, like if I'm interviewing you and I'm already planning what I'm going to say next, I didn't hear what you just said. So I'm unable to be as good of an interviewer. Well, the same thing happens in a sales call. It happens in a marketing presentation. It happens in anything as a coach, leader, whatever. You talked a lot about how this person told you this and you learned this at this time. Talk a little bit about some mentors you have, people that have made an impact on your life other than family, and talk about specifically how they've done that.
Yeah, so I probably three key mentors I've had are John Waldron, obviously our CEO and founder. I probably spend more waking hours with John than I likely do my wife. I'm at the office. I've been at the office every day for longer than I've been married to my wife. So and I've been married 12 years. So that kind of says something. So John, entrepreneur, founder. Very technically strong, so he's an accountant by training, and it's very tough sometimes to find accountants that are technically versed but can still relate, tell a story, and be entrepreneurially driven. A gentleman by the name of John Irvin, he was the person that I met early on, also an accountant, ironically enough, accountant entrepreneur. He was another gentleman that I met. Friend of the family. I did some intern work for him at Innovative Benefits Consulting. He's the person that connected me to John Waldron 16 years ago. He's still, funny how the circle of life comes. He now serves as sort of an independent advisory capacity for our firm as well. So he's had a very great career, worked for public companies, has worked he had his own entrepreneurial ventures. He's worked in the corporate world. So he brings a breadth of experience. And then a gentleman by the name of Andy Putterman. Andy is also an independent person on our advisory council at the office. And he brings a breadth of experience. One, he's been in financial services for 20, 30 plus years. He's run 140 person operations. He's sold to public companies, sold his business to public companies. So he understands the financial services. He also understands the business to business side. He understands the business to consumer side. He brings a breadth of experience. He's from the DC area, so he's from outside the Pittsburgh market. So you can kind of get some outside Pittsburgh experience from him as well. He's been very critical for me thinking about how to run and how to think about running the business. John has been, great John Waldron's been great from entrepreneurial, how to think and act and focus on being, meeting with clients and potential clients. Andy's been great with focusing on how to run the business, strategic planning, developing a sales culture, building a pipeline, understanding and tracking your metrics, all those things.
How'd you meet Andy?
Andy got connected to us because he was the CEO of a technology company that was a vendor for us. So he was a CEO of a technology company, and they were our vendor. We used their software, and then he sold his company to a public company. And you kind of know how these things all go. He was there for a couple years and then left, but still loved, he loves to play business. And so he started his own consulting firm for higher end wealth management firms like ours across the country. So he does some consulting work for us. He serves on our advisory council. He's worked with us on employee metrics. He's worked with us on culture building. He's been a really good independent person, which I like, having that independent voice sort of guiding you along the way. It's funny, John, I was talking about John Waldron. He and I were catching up on the way down here on a a meeting we had with a potential client yesterday, and we were coaching each other on that meeting. Okay, this is what worked well. This is what we do to improve. This is how we change. I mean, it's that continuous improvement and understanding, I'm willing to take that feedback and advice. John is amazing, is willing to take that feedback and advice as well, which I think has allowed us to progress on the trajectory that we have.
Hear more of my interview with Matt Helfrich of Waldron and about when he was a BSer, what he learned from it to take that and improve in his career. Hear more about that on part 2 of the No BS Marketing Show.